Looks like we're live.
Maybe. Mine thing's doing like the blue line taking time.
Okay.
So maybe it's done. We might be on. Hey, everybody. I think we're on.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. You are with us here at what are we doing? Are you there, God? It's Kira and Phil. The perpetual question, basically, are you there, God? Um, we we've got a lot of questions. You've got a lot of questions. We're gonna try and answer them, or at least have conversation about them, if not answer them directly.
Or maybe we'll all just turn towards God and be like, you got a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, which I think that is underrepresented as a very faithful response. So
Oh yeah.
I feel like the more that I read the Psalms, then the more I pray the Psalms, I'm like, yeah, why did we ever get the message that you had to come to God in a certain way? Or
I always feel bad when I'm mad at God. The moment I get mad at God, I'm like, look, I'm mad at you. I'm sorry. I know you're God. And I'm sure this is all my fault, but
anyway, we're so glad you're with us this morning. I am Kira Austin Young. I'm an Episcopal priest, the priest in charge of St. Anne's in Nashville.
And I'm Philip DeVaul. I'm also an Episcopal priest, and I'm working at Church of the Redeemer in Cincinnati, Ohio. Hence the big C on my head. The scarlet letter that I wear blazoned across my forehead. Hey, my old man used to say that you could be that he's always like, you should be allowed to be angry with God. He's like, God made the whole world. He can handle your anger.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not a terrible point. That's not a terrible point. Like, if the God who made the whole world couldn't deal with you're angry with me, well then we're not working together.
Yeah.
The diva God who's like, I just can't even.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too much into my own therapy and emotions, but I have had a journey of trying to embrace anger for myself, because that was a thing that I did not always feel that I was allowed to be as a woman.
I was going to ask if that was, is that at least in part being a woman?
I think it's, yeah, I mean, and particularly kind of culturally Southern, to not really be allowed to be angry or not really be able to to know what expressing that would look like. So for me, it would often just look like sadness, but it was really anger.
Wow. Because a sad woman is actually more acceptable than an angry woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a sad woman, a man might be able to cheer up.
Yeah.
And a man can tell you to smile. But an angry woman it scares a man.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing you want to be is scary.
To a man.
Yes.
Because the way men respond to that is never pleasant. No. A friend of mine, I think I told you this before, lent me a book called Good and Mad. And it's about feminine rage and the necessity of it for the purpose of societal change. But I mean, so there's there's a whole chapter of just how anger is good. Being the idea that anger is, and being a woman and being an angry woman, instead of being you shouldn't be angry, we should be where's the anger coming from, and what's the purpose of it? It's I preached this Sunday about when people freak out about God getting angry.
Yeah.
And it's God's getting angry. And we're like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. And it's no, it's okay if God gets angry. The question is, what is God angry at and why?
Yeah.
Right. And we get so freaked out by the possibility that God could be angry that we go, I don't like the angry God. Well, you're not. It's like when I say to my kid, you're going to timeout. And he goes, well, I don't like going to timeout. Yeah, I know.
Too bad.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. If you liked it, you would just be like me, wishing someone would put me in timeout. I want 40 minutes alone by my, you do 1 minute of timeout per year of age you are.
Oh,
right? So a
okay.
3-year-old gets 3 minutes, a 4-year-old gets 4 minutes, and so on. And I'm like, 41 minutes of solitude? I'm in.
Yeah.
I want that. But anyways, yeah. So God's angry, and I'm like, well, I don't like that. You're not supposed to.
It should be terrifying.
Here's an idea. Stop doing things that piss God off. Just an idea. Just a thought. So I wanted to say hi to Lisa and Betsy, who've said hello in the chat. I haven't seen anyone else say hello. So either my chat is not updating or everyone's being quiet over there on the side.
We did get a good morning from Gary Lubin.
And Gary Lubin sent us a good morning email. I saw that. So I don't know if Kathy's with us. I don't know if anyone else is with us. If Leslie's here, if you are, say hi in the chat and we will make sure that we know that you're here. And Kira and I have an idea of what we want to talk about today based on what we were talking about last week, but we are always open for some questions.
Yeah. And I think actually this conversation about God's anger might actually kind of fold in well to where we might be going. We're so good at this.
I love how that works. Kathy Baggett says good morning from Columbus, Ohio.
Because God is angry at injustice, usually.
Like when you do things to harm others, God doesn't like it. When you contribute to systems that systemically marginalize people and keep some people, like fat and happy and others, starving and naked, that's on God's going to be angry about that. And it'd be weird if God wasn't.
Yeah.
Like if God was like, well, there's really no such thing as good or bad. It's all just shades of gray.
Yeah.
Can you imagine God just being like, I don't know, I guess. I guess it's a problem. I don't know.
So I don't know if you have had any of these conversations. I know in our kind of like clergy gatherings in our diocese, and just in kind of broader conversations I've had, like it has come up about, like, do you start to have services that are for vaccinated people only?
Someone brought it up and I yes. Do you want a spoiler about what my response was or like, or did you want to say more about it? Yes, that's been brought up in my church.
Yeah. So you have also heard these conversations, and again, with these kind of like, these are very biblical conversations that we're all having. I mean, the details are different.
Yep.
But like the meat of it is the same.
Yeah.
Like, do you, exclude certain populations from coming to the table, essentially?
Right. So that others can do it right.
Mm-hmm.
Do it the way they like.
Yeah.
We had someone, one person asked me sort of very like, what's that word? When something like tangentially, they did like a tangential ask, or they didn't directly ask the question, but they asked the question. So now that some people are vaccinated and some people aren't, how might that change the rules for gathering?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the whole question. But I read into that question, maybe inappropriately, but I mean, I think the only thing that can mean is, will there be separate rules for those who are vaccinated and those who are not? What else could it mean?
Yeah. And
I just said, well, let me tell you what people getting vaccinated, how it changes things. It lowers case numbers drastically and gets us out of the red and into the color where we can gather again. And so that's how it changes things.
Yeah.
And there was like this pause. They were like waiting for like, yeah, but, and I was like, we're not going to treat people who are vaccinated differently than we treat people who aren't vaccinated. Now, I want to be clear. I've already been like, I've gotten my first shot. I know you've been vaccinated. I am very unequivocally and clearly pro-vaccination. And I know that there are people who are nervous about the vaccines. And I understand that. And you will not be kept from coming to church. I wish you'd get vaccinated. I think everybody should, period. That's what I think. That being said, not everyone can yet. And some people won't, whether I want them to or not. And we're not going to create a, what the example I used in that was like the star-bellied sneeches from, Dr. Seuss has been in the news a lot lately, but the star-bellied Sneetches. Good morning, Leslie. And like the idea that like some people have it and some people don't. Like I said, we're all in this together, and when we're all wearing masks. Like it doesn't matter if there's only one person in the room that hasn't been vaccinated, but we are still at this point in the color coding system. We're all wearing masks.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the reality. And we're all going to distance, and we're going to follow these rules as a community.
Yeah, I think, and the way I've sort of seen it, or like the way I've kind of talked to myself about it, is like the more people that get vaccinated, the safer that the gathering becomes.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that like if I have 15 people in a room and 12 of them are vaccinated, that's great. That means the gathering is quite a bit safer than if none of them were vaccinated. But like we're still gonna like wear masks and maintain our distance and do all that stuff. But just the fact of being able to kind of gather relatively safely or safer as kind of everything goes along is a good thing.
You were saying before we started recording that you guys had a really good Sunday and you were able to be together.
Yeah. Kind of in a limited capacity, sign up only. But just to have kind of people in the space worshiping together really, and like, it wasn't just me, like the volunteer who's been helping me with the technology, like after the service, he was like, that felt really good. I was like, I know, right? Like it felt so good. Even just to have, normally before the pandemic, I'd be like, oh my gosh, only 14 people came to church. Like what
like what's wrong?
Yeah, what's wrong? Like where is everybody?
Right.
And we're gonna start. That was inside. We're gonna start moving towards doing a small service inside and then a larger service outside.
Right.
As we get closer to kind of Holy Week and Easter.
Yeah.
So just kind of being able to do that. I think we've had a lot of people, I kind of joked about like Episcopal churches are full of, one, a lot of older people, two, pretty like educated people who are, not on the face of it, like against vaccination, who appreciate the science and listen to their doctors and all of that good stuff. And also people that are pretty like savvy into like, you can navigate, the sign up process, or you can, somebody who can navigate the sign up process for you. So there are a lot of advantages that I think a lot of our congregations have for the most part in this process. So, I've got a lot of folks who are in that like over 65 category, and also like a lot of teachers, and even just like that group of people is like a good chunk of the congregation.
Yeah. So you're able to start doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We still have an issue where we have seniors who've been vaccinated, but they're living in retirement communities that aren't letting them out yet. They're in retirement community prison. And, I had one lady say that it was like being in a prison run by Martha Stewart. She's like, everything is beautiful. It's very well decorated. The food is lovely, but we can't get out.
Right.
So, that's a thing. Good morning, Leslie. I don't know if I said good morning to you already.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, the CDC guidelines sort of just came out yesterday about like what vaccinated people can and can't do. And, I know definitely that our hospitals and retirement communities and any kind of congregate living situations here have been pretty locked down in terms of visitors. So I'm looking forward to maybe some of those guidelines loosening up a little bit, or like, you can visit if you're vaccinated.
Right. I mean, we've got some folks where in one case, a husband is in a congregate care facility and the wife isn't, and they haven't been able to see each other hardly at all. And it's absurd.
Ugh.
Like, because they're both, by the way, they've both had COVID and they're both vaccinated.
Oh my gosh.
So like, just
let them see each other.
Like daily, let them hang out all day.
Yeah.
Like, she's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. They're a mile apart. Just do the thing where they're to be like, where in their old age, they can hang.
Yeah.
I get it's
that's heartbreaking.
But I don't know what it's like I don't know what rules. I mean, I know that I've set out rules at this church that are probably, I mean, it's not the same situation. It's not life or death like that, but I'm sure that I have set up rules that for one or two people have been heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that's not my intent, of course, but it's tricky. But again, at least in the case of what we do, we need to model that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the rules, the mechanism for the decisions that were made in these retirement communities. I know that they are trying to take care of people. We also always know they're trying to cover their own asses, right? Like from lawsuits. We always know that's part of the picture. We wish that it wasn't. And then you run a nonprofit and you go like, okay, I understand that. At least I don't like it, but I understand that it's
the world
there.
we live in, unfortunately.
It's tricky. So I get that. I do get that. I was going to ask you something and I totally forgot what it was. I'm sure it was I know what I was going to ask you. You were saying something. We're going to get to these. We're going to get to our topic today in a second, but you were saying something about the demographics of our church. Man, don't you think that our church would do well to figure out how to be like on average, not just made up of people of higher education?
Yeah.
Like there's a like, what would it look like if we actually were less educated, if we brought in people who were less educated and our church was composed of people that weren't just with college degrees and advanced degrees?
Yeah. So you were kind of talking about a little bit about what you preached this Sunday, and I sort of preached a little bit of that this Sunday in terms of Paul's letter to the Corinthians and God's foolishness being wiser than the wisdom of this world. And I know I'm part of a congregation. I think a lot of Episcopal churches are this way, where I have had parishioners say to me, when we did, our parish study or a parish survey, we had like this very high percentage of people in our congregation with graduate degrees and terminal degrees and professional degrees. And like, this was something they were like really, really proud of. And I'm like, that's great. Also, that's a problem.
Right. They think and it's a problem that we're excited about that we consider that the Episcopalians, we consider ourselves better because we are on average have a higher education level than many other denominations. And therefore we're better.
Yeah.
And which says a lot about our priorities.
We don't check our brain at the door.
I know.
But it does have an homogenizing effect in terms of just the life experiences that people have had. Like, of course you go to college. Of course you get some kind of, white collar, pink collar job. Or you're a doctor, or you're a lawyer, or you're a teacher, and you're pretty highly educated. And but we don't, we don't have a lot of people in our congregations who are plumbers,
right?
Who are factory workers, who are sanitation workers, or like
and then consequently meat packers, and then consequently, when there's something like COVID happening, and for the first 6 months and 9 months and 100,000, 150, 200,000, whatever, 300,000 people are dying, and people in the church are like, well, I don't know anyone who's died.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's actually not a good thing about you. No offense to anyone who's listening, that's the case for. To me too. Like, it took a while before I knew someone. I had friends who knew people, or I had friends who had family members, but like seeing COVID do the damage it did along racial and class distinction lines and socioeconomic lines was devastating.
Yeah.
And so when we're like, well, we don't know anybody who had it, it's like, yeah, that says more about us than it does about COVID. And same thing with like when we get like about education, well, our people are highly educated. Well, great, but do they know Jesus?
Yeah.
Right. Like, genuinely, like, I'd rather hang out with someone who's all in on loving their neighbor than on someone who's like highly educated. But, also I speak from a place of immense privilege and immense educational privilege. I mean, I've done my hard work, except honestly, like, I didn't work that hard in college. I got a college degree from Tufts University, which is one of those colleges that people say is a good college. I had a terrible time, but I got my very crappy GPA, but no one notices that. They see the diploma, and I got out. And then and people, oh, you went there. First, I didn't try very hard. A mediocre white guyed my way through the whole thing, graduated. And then I went to seminary and I have a master's degree. Now I worked hard in seminary, but again, like I have all these degrees, and you and I, like we're part of that. When we describe those people and you're talking about white collar, who's more white collar than us?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm
Right?
like 100% part of this. This is the milieu that I came out of. You know,
Yep.
my parents were people that very, very highly valued education, and to some extent sort of like name brand education.
Right. Same.
You know, I mean, we would sort of snarkily joke in my schools, like, oh, I got a bad grade on this test, I'm going to end up going to community college. Like that was the worst thing in the world.
Yep.
And like now I'm like, oh, I just cringe at how like snobby and elitist like that kind of viewpoint was and is. And
how snobby and elitist I was like yesterday.
Yeah.
not like when I was a kid, like yesterday.
I mean, I'm glad that like my congregation, I can use $10 words with them in sermons. And
well, you just said you're part of the milieu. And I'm like, you know what milieu you're a part of because you use the word milieu. Like that's how you know, right? You know, I agree. I'm a very, like, I love words, and I like to use as many words as possible, both in terms of length of conversation. I like to say everything, but I also like to use different words to mean the same thing. I love all that. It's fun for me, but it can be distancing. Yeah. You know, it can be a little bit of I don't intend that. But I do sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do it to make yourself feel better.
I wonder how much, as much as I love the Book of Common Prayer, I really, really do. There have been times when I've kind of like put myself in some different shoes or tried to look at it through some different eyes and been like, what does this all mean? Mm-hmm. Like the first time I was doing an Ash Wednesday service for kids, I was looking at like the collect of the day for Ash Wednesday, and I was like, what do these words mean?
Right.
Like,
right. Why would I say this in front of other people? Yeah, yep. Right. I mean, I think like you and I think both like the right one, Eucharist. But like every time I say oblation, I'm like, just stop. Just stop saying the word oblation. They're like, nobody knows what you're saying. I know. Nobody knows. And I don't want to be that. I mean, here's the deal. Now, here's the tricky thing is to feel this way without being an anti-intellectual. Right. Because one of the things that we've seen in our country has been this move of anti-intellectualism, that if it smells like it might be educated, then it's probably suspect. Mm-hmm. The distrust of institutions and educational institutions, the distrust of doctors and scientists is just as dangerous as the sort of utter obedience to or fealty to doctors and scientists. Right. Like they're both dangerous. Yeah. I mean, I joke about those signs that say, like in this house, we believe. Yeah. And one of the things is like, we believe in science. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like science has a very racist history. Did you believe in science when it was saying that people with certain skull sizes were? Because that was science. Yeah. That was scientists were saying that. Yeah. Scientists created the classifications of race that we have since gotten rid of, or at least have tried to get rid of, and that is no longer acceptable. Yeah. So look at something like body mass index, BMI, which a lot of states are using as part of the vaccine rollout. Again, the body mass index has an incredibly racist and weird capitalist history in terms of its usage by like insurance companies and stuff like that. And man, I read that article about like the history of the BMI, and I was just like, first of all, I've always hated it. Yeah. Because it's never been kind to me. No, I know. Body mass index has never been my pal. Okay. I'm 5'7". Okay. When I was at my like skinniest that I've been as an adult, and that was when I was like doing like juice cleanses and blah, 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 blah. I got down to 161. I'm 5'7". According to the BMI, I was supposed to be like 150 or 148. Now, I guess I could have done it, but I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
My heart was fine. My blood pressure was fine. My cholesterol's fine, right? Like my body is okay. I
Mhm.
get checked. I go to the doctor. I do the thing. They do the like. Meanwhile, my blood pressure goes up because of work.
Yeah.
Anyways, but your point being that this thing that BMI is considered science. I
Mhm.
mean, listen, Dr. King wrote about this. He wrote about like what, like science. He's like, don't forget, science split the atom and created the atom bomb. That's
Yeah.
science. Science creates eugenics. That's science. So science isn't bad and science isn't good.
Yeah,
Science is,
it's also not a monolith. Like you
that's
can't
what
just
kills
say
me. When people are like, thank you, science, or I believe in science. I'm like what, like, I mean, humans used scientific method to create the vaccine. That's true.
yeah,
But
which is great.
there's a lot of humanity in that.
Yes.
And our decision to do it and how we funded it and all that is not all science. A lot of that's humanity.
Yeah.
How did we get on this topic? We
Um
were talking about educated people and being intellectual and anti-intellectual. If you go to my church, please don't ever say that at the Episcopal Church we don't check our brains at the door. It's incredibly insulting to other people in other faiths.
Yeah, I think part of
And also a lot of people who you think check their brains at the door on the way in. Well, a lot of our Christians check their faith. A lot of Episcopalians check their faith on the door on the way out.
ooh,
Episcopalians are perfectly faithful indoors, and then they'll walk out and like not talk about their faith, not be willing to pray, not read their scriptures, not be serious about the miraculous presence of God, God's reconciling work in the world and God's presence, not believe in the resurrection. But indoors, they're perfectly religious. But we privilege our intellect, what we think of as intellect, over our spiritual connections. And that's a big concern that I have for our denomination. You know?
yeah, and I think I know this is true kind of for me, and like my kind of faith journey has really been about how much of my faith is tied into sort of like white upper middle class respectability and what that looks like, and how is that different from what the gospel calls me to, which kind of going back to Paul's letter to the Corinthians, that's kind of what I preached about on Sunday, which was like, there's this wisdom of the world that says, I get mine first. I need to save for retirement. I need to do all of these things. I need to look a certain way to be kind of presentable. And the gospel says like, no, you're supposed to give all your money away.
Right.
And it's like, if you did that, people would look at you and be like, you're an idiot.
Well, and even that, like what you're supposed to do is live in community. Like, because the giving of money away for the purpose of living in community, and like even that we've turned into like giving your money away as like a metric.
Yeah.
Like we just live in this country, but just give our money away. Well, of course that seems unrealistic, because there's because we're not part of communities that sustain one another. Mm-hmm. We do have communities. Our churches, I think, sustain each other spiritually, and there are emotional connections. It's not like we're starting from scratch. Our churches are, right. I mean, you and I both belong to churches that we love deeply and we think are doing good work. Yes. And I mean, my church has been an incredible lifeblood for me throughout the last year. And I know has been for people on this call and who listen, like the connections there are really important. They're very real. And also we can keep going.
Yeah.
Right. We can create, you talked a lot when we first were doing this work together, when I was asking you about all of the different questions about the book that you wrote, Pro-Choice and Christian. Do I have it nearby? I like to plug your book every chance I get. It's not right here. I think I put it away, sadly. But you were talking when you were talking about your book about part of the work that Christians should be doing is creating communities. You talk about maybe a country or a system, but I'm going to break it down to communities.
Yeah.
In which women feel supported throughout their whole lives in such a way that abortion maybe doesn't seem like an attractive option, right?
Or at least not
or a necessity.
Yeah.
Right. No, right. That it's when we put so much, and so part of the work isn't just like, that's why pro-life shouldn't just mean pro-birth, as they say, right? Mm-hmm. Or as you say as well. but like, what does it look like to create communities that sustain life? And any conversation about abortion, which is all, now we're talking about abortion, but that doesn't include transforming our community around the sustaining and caring for like each other and interdependent life is a worthless, is at least is a conversation that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, to the point, like, it isn't just about abortion. It's also about working people that have to care for aging parents. It's about access to healthcare. You know, if I'm not feeling well or I have something that is bothering me, can I go and see a doctor without being worried about one, missing work and getting fired? Do I have transportation there? Do I, you know, what does it mean if I walk into the ER or the care clinic or whatever, and the doctor isn't in my insurance network, or like what, all of that stuff, you know, people getting hit by these huge bills just because they sought out help.
We don't care about the working class in this country. We talk about caring about the working class, but we don't care. I mean, like, and anyone below that, I mean, anyone who's barely making it, anyone who like, and so what would it look like to create a culture where like, when you're sick, you stay home?
Yeah.
That's it. Without fear of losing your job. Right? Why weren't you there? Well, I was sick. Well, I was sick. I came to work. Well, then you're a jerk. I have been sick and come to work. And when people asked if I was sick, I have said no, or I've said, yeah, but I'm on my way back up, when I wasn't, and I knew it.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a priest, not just before that, because I couldn't handle what it would mean for me to be gone for a couple of days.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. And I'm really doing a lot of soul examination about what that looks like in the future, because, you know, I'm a solo clergy person. I'm the only clergy person at my church. Yeah. And the feeling of pride and, oh, well, like, what will people think if I stay home because I'm not feeling well? Or, how will church go on without me if I'm not there?
You know what my worst feeling is, right?
That they won't miss you.
Oh, no, dang. Yeah, actually that's
one of mine.
Hold on. Now goodbye, everybody. You just hit the button. That's my deepest fear and I remember thinking this in college, was that when I left the room, people forgot I existed. It wasn't that they were glad I was gone. That's a whole other thing. Like, my actual fear was like that I wouldn't matter. Right. Yeah. But so now you've just hit me in the feels on a deep level, but you didn't, but no, I mean, my biggest fear, my biggest like conscious fear generally is like, what will they think?
Yeah.
If I'm not there, what will they think? What's this guy's problem?
Yeah.
Right. And you're right. I mean, like, this last year, I've done a lot of soul searching, and I just got a text from one of my employees that they just got in for their vaccine.
Woo!
Couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
It's just the best.
It is like, I feel more, I'm feeling stronger emotions around other people getting the vaccine than I did about myself getting the vaccine.
When my wife gets her vaccine, I will lose my ever loving mind.
Yeah.
I was very excited to get the vaccine. When my wife gets vaccinated, I can't wait. I cannot wait. I want it to be today, you know?
Yeah. My music director emailed me yesterday, and he said, like, he's got an appointment for next week. And I was just like, like,
yep. Yes. Okay.
We were actually going to talk about, we're sort of been talking around what we were going to be talking about.
It's all there in the cloud, guys. Just kind of part it, and it's there. You can see it. It's okay. Can I get us started? And then I want you to riff for a little bit. Cause you've been spitting today. You've been throwing some wisdom, and I like just kind of want to listen to Kira. As much as I like talking, I want to listen to Kira. Okay. We've been talking a lot about these sort of, and I know, listen, friends, I know this is like buzz language, okay? But we've been talking a lot about justice in terms of like social like social lives. Like social justice, I guess, is a term. If I'm being completely honest, I get a little allergic to the term social justice. We can discuss that at another time. But justice is God making things right. Okay. And we understand that that has to have an impact on our daily lives here and now. Or really, what are we talking about? Mm-hmm. If we're just talking about that everything will be made right when you're dead, then basically, where is God in the here and now? And what is God's power and presence, and why are we praying? And when we say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we are literally praying for God to make down here more like up there. That is our prayer. The prayer is literally, make here seem more like up there. Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't happen without justice. God's justice is God's will being done on earth as it is in heaven. God's justice is love in action, right? So, but we were talking about women's rights. We've talked about abortion. We've talked about LGBTQ issues, I think last week or the week before. And and all of these could be labeled. I'll personally resist the label out of my own stubbornness, but could be labeled like progressive issues or like fall down in a specific area of the current American political spectrum. But I felt last week that it was really important that we talk a little bit about, when we were talking about the racial justice last week specifically, that we didn't get deeply into how for you and I, and for many Christians, this is a deeply Christian understanding, that we believe that this is obedience to Jesus, that racial justice, that justice of any kind, but when we were talking about societal change towards a more just reality, race, gender, sexuality, individual rights about your own body, enfranchisement, things like this, healthcare, that these are actually, that our belief in them is connected deeply and rooted in our understanding of who Jesus is in the world. And not just, and this for me is especially true, is not just about what we thought politically already being backed up. Like, I believe this, now how do I make sure my religion reflects that? Mm-hmm. Right? Is that a fair sort of, so today we were going to talk about like the Jesus-y part of all this?
Yeah, sort of like where does Jesus fit into it? And I think like for me, I don't know how to kind of grapple with these issues without, like, if not Jesus, then sort of Christian ethics or like a, Christian ethical foundation, because I don't really place a lot of not importance necessarily, but like, I guess faith in something like the US Constitution.
Right.
So I actually can't tell you, when the issues of kind of same-sex marriage were coming up, like, is that a constitutional issue? I don't really know, but I do know that my faith says something about, what is marriage? What is the purpose of it? What does it look like in terms of like a sacrament,
right,
or sacramental rite, whatever language you want to use.
Yeah.
And the same with sort of dealing with racism and racial issues, which we particularly as Americans, we come to this conversation. There is a kind of school of thought that sort of says like, well, we all have our identity in Christ, and so therefore there are no racial issues, because. Right. But
I don't see race.
I don't see race.
I'm post-racial.
And yet everyone who has ever said to me, oh, I don't see race, could easily tell me that like, oh yeah, well, my daughter-in-law is Black. Like, oh, I thought you didn't see race, but guess what? Your daughter-in-law being Black, like everyone else can see that. And that affects her lived reality.
Right.
And it affects when she goes into a store and gets followed around because somebody thinks she's shoplifting.
Right.
Or it affects, when she goes to the store and wants to buy a Band-Aid and all of the colors are nude and all of them match
Skin tone, right?
white people.
Right.
And those are sort of, I mean, those are like a little kind of toss off examples. I think one of the real questions for me is can the white church be saved?
Say more.
Or is it just so entwined with
white supremacy,
with whiteness, with anti-blackness to some degree, that with colonialism, especially speaking as Anglicans, that like we just need to shut it down for 100 years and like and start over, you know? I hope not, because I like what I do and I love my church, and I think we do good work in a lot of ways.
You know, what's interesting is there was this, you've heard of Phyllis Tickle's sort of conversation about sort of every 500 years, there's like a big religious shakeup.
Mm-hmm.
And which she stole from an Episcopal bishop, Mark Dyer, who's a teacher of mine, and that's a separate story, but I love to name drop when I get the chance. And it's just who I am. But we kind of thought that the Reformation, this new Reformation, was this sort of postmodern emergent movement.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's the death of white supremacy? That gives me a lot more hope.
Yeah.
Than just whether or not we have church the way we thought we were going to have church.
Right.
What if what we're actually seeing is not about deconstructionism or postmodernism or blah, 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 blah? What if what we're actually seeing is the death of white modernism? White, like, so, you know, the thing in which you and I were are deeply entrenched and were raised. And I worry about what you just said too. Like, does the church survive it? Does the white church, I should say, survive it? The church as we know it? And I don't know. But wait a minute. But we still haven't talk to me a little bit about how Jesus informs your understanding of the things you're talking about.
Yeah. So I, firmly believe that everything that is created by God. I'm created by God. You're created by God. Every bird, tree, leaf, everything starts with being a creation of God. And as humans, you know, we are all, there is no, in some sense, this is right. There is no division of humans. There is no Jew or Greek. There is no male or female. We are all one in Christ Jesus, who became human, who's God, become human, to save us.
Right.
And to that extent, any boundaries we draw, any the way we racialize things, because race is a social construct, even though and to say it's a social construct doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, because money is a social construct, and that's how I keep a roof over my head. Yeah. But that we are all one in Christ Jesus, and that means that we can't oppress one another.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was trying not to jump in. I want to look before I push a little bit more. I want to look at what Leslie says here in the chat. Can we follow and teach the good word of God in Christ without forcing people who have been harmed by the institution to have to re-engage with everything that has traumatic connections for them? See, this is a phenomenal question, and I don't know the answer, to be honest with you. Well, one, we shouldn't force anyone to do anything.
Right.
Right? It should never be coercive. Two, it ends up being, I think, part of the empowerment of the former victim, if and how they choose to re-engage with something, needs to be like their part of their agency, because there are times when re-engaging with something that has traumatized you in the past can be part of the process of healing if you have power now and have the capacity to, like, and there's room for healing. And there are other times when staying away is what you need to do for your own sake and safety. And so that's tricky. And can we create communities that are, I think like one of the things that the emergent movement was helpful for me was, can we create, not that it always did it perfectly, nothing ever does, but can we create communities for people who have been traumatized by the institutional church that allows them to experience what we believe the church is meant to be without triggering those traumas or requiring people to sort of fall back in line. And man, I don't know the answer perfectly, but I hope so. And we should never force. So first let me say that I have never understood myself as politically liberal.
Right.
I don't know if this is one of the things I don't like to say publicly, and here I am on, I mean, luckily, it's not 1,000 people watching our show. I don't really like the term progressive actually at all. I think it's really problematic. Because like conservative and liberal, I like because they they are literal opposites, but progressive suggests that you want progress and anyone who's not like you is regressive. Like it's inherently polemical term. And I have problems with that. What are you for? I'm for progress. Also, we've seen a lot of things done in the name of progress, as we named before, that are really damaging.
Yeah.
I have a real problem with inherently disliking conservatism, because there are things that people that are meant to be conserved, and because culture is by nature conservative. Like something becomes culture by people doing it over and over again and holding on to it. So the idea that anything that is old is bad, or holding on to anything that are old is bad, because we're always moving, we're always forward, we're always changing, we're always progressing. It also creates a dynamic that the people of our ancient times and who lived within the ancient scriptures and the societies are all regressive and are all primitive. There's a real condescension towards the past that can occur there. And I have a lot of problems with that.
I also think it actually is sort of a false narrative of like, and I mean, I don't, like the Martin Luther King Jr. quote about the arc of history.
The arc of history bends towards justice.
Yeah.
It's long, but bends, right.
Yeah, it's long, but it bends towards justice. And that's kind of a quote unquote progressive statement, in that there is sort of an arc of history and it goes in a direction. And I just don't think that's true.
Right. Right.
I think it's more like circular, like we just kind of, sort of like come back, or maybe you think of it as a pendulum and it kind of swings back and forth.
I think of it as a death spiral, but go ahead. But it means, do you have a better relationship with God than Abraham and Sarah did?
Right.
Because you're so much more advanced than them.
Or is the ideal of the nuclear family, is that more faithful than a sort of more quote unquote tribal view of family and community and relationship? Like, what does it mean to be kind of beholden to people that are beyond your bloodline in a sense?
Yep. So all that said, there, thank you for that. Helps me a lot. Like what you just said helps me a lot. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, in terms of that, like the arc thing. And the idea that we're always, I mean, I do see humanity in many ways, there are ways in which we are improving as a species.
Yes.
And also there are ways in which we're becoming more depraved.
Yeah. I mean, there are great things like, what's great? Germ theory, antibiotics, knowing how to have clean water, and
no, and also on a societal level, like most of our societies are now totally disgusted by the idea of public execution. We're like 100 years ago, they were like, hey, we're going to go downtown. They're hanging some folks.
Yeah.
Like, and that's changed. Or like back in the day when they were like, let's just feed these people to the lions. Like privately? No, it'll be like a sport. Everybody will watch. Right? Like we're moving in the right direction in that sense. Like, that's good. Like as humanity is like, maybe not. Right. Yeah. And it used to just be like, well, let's just conquer some stuff. And now we still do it, but we like feel bad about it. And we're like, well, no, that's not what it was. It was something else, because we know that conquering stuff is like not cool anymore. So there's places where we might be getting it a little bit right, maybe. But overall, yeah, it's not this beautiful arc where we just keep getting better. Right. Okay. So I don't identify personally in these sort of political ways. I have political opinions. I'm not saying I'm apolitical. I'm certainly not saying that. I have problems personally with political affiliation. They stem from when I was a child, and I was taught in my home, in my culture, in my church, in my community, that to be a good Christian meant to be a conservative Republican, and which also made you a good American.
Mm-hmm. And
then you were a good Christian. My rejection of that took me away from church for a while. Didn't become politically liberal at that point. The whole idea of tying those things together was problematic. But then I found the Episcopal Church, where I very quickly found out that by and large, the unspoken reality was to be a good Democrat or a good liberal meant being a good Christian. Mm-hmm. And so that was really problematic for me as well, because tying those things together is really problematic. But when you read when I read the New Testament now, well, first of all, when I read the Old Testament, and we talked about the angry God, that's why you said we were getting there earlier. When I read about the angry God of the Old Testament, I read about a God who's angry at injustice, who says, I don't care about your rituals and your fasts and your virtue signaling. I care that hungry people are fed and homeless people are housed. And by the way, it says, bring them into your homes. It doesn't say provide housing and then check in on them every once in a while. That people who are on the out get brought in, and that there is no margin anymore. That debts are forgiven. That people who are hungry are fed. That the people who are from the outside, the alien and foreigner among you, as the language that's used, is treated as one of your own. That's biblical Christianity. That's not liberal or conservative. That's biblical Christianity, is an insistence on a justice that pervades your community here and now. And when it doesn't, you piss God off. It's just the reality. Sorry, right? Okay, New Testament. All of the letters that Paul writes, and the others too, but Paul's like, Paul, come on. Very, very formative. I'm a big fan, by the way. Big fan of Paul. All of Paul's letters are basically, you people that I've brought together have been brought together from across cultural, political, linguistic, class, socioeconomic differences. You're now part of one community, and you don't know how to do it, and it's hard. But because of Jesus, you're supposed to. For Paul, the resurrection insisted that communities were supposed to be built from across these differences. Adherence, obedience to Jesus, and adherence to Christianity meant sharing communities and forging communities across historic differences. Now, race didn't exist then the way we talk about it now. So notice I haven't said across races, but it's very clear that the idea is the same.
The Jew and Greek distinction
says there is no Jew or Greek. There is no male or female. There is no slave or free. He's not saying, I don't see color, man. He's saying construct communities that treat people across those varied demarcations, treat them with equity and care for each other across, transgress those historical boundaries for the purpose of taking care of one another. And when you read Paul, like Paul does this, Romans, right? He does this whole like deep theological picture of the cosmos that is like a universe that is like yearning for salvation, and that gets it, that Jesus does it. And then the climax, though, is then chapter 12, when he's like, since all this stuff is true, here's what I'm going to need you to do. Treat each other with love and respect in your community. That he doesn't say, go make everyone believe this and change the laws so that everyone believes all the same things. He's like, so since the whole creation has been saved by the power of Jesus, you need to live in your community not like an a-hole. You need to be cool to one another, that love each other. That's the rule, and do that in real ways. And when I say love each other, I don't just mean be pleasant. I mean, forgive one another, bear one another's burdens, and genuinely try to build each other up into healthy, loving community. Like So the Old Testament and the New Testament are different, but they're pointing towards the same reality. And it was through seeing that. And by the way, it was through seeing that when I was doing the Becoming Beloved community work, which I'm still doing, but like when I was just starting out.
Yeah.
When I was like, holy crap. The whole New Testament is pointing towards this reality that what a saved people looks like is a people who are reconciled to one another across these boundaries that our countries and our communities set up. And then now I'm like, so now in my politics, it's like, again, like you said, like, yes, I'm not a constitutionalist, but as a Christian, I want to be part of a community where all of these people are honored and cared for with equity. And if it's not that, I don't like. If that makes me conservative sometimes, fine. If it makes me liberal sometimes, fine. I don't care. But like it's gotta be about that. Right. So that to me is like, it's not, I really want to caution any of us. Are we being liberals first and then Christians second? Are we being progressives first and then Christians second? Are we being conservatives first and then Christians? Are we being moderates? Because Episcopalians also are addicted to moderation. Yeah. We being moderates first. Are you an American first? And here's the thing that I think you already said it, but I'm just going to say it in different words. Like something that we are grappling with right now is that for many of us, we are white first. Mm-hmm. And we are male first. And we are heterosexual and cisgender first. And then Christian second. And so we have constructed a Christianity that supports the supremacy of people basically like me. I fit the mold like just beautifully. Yeah. I come right, they didn't break the mold after they made me. They just made a bunch more just like me. And I think, so just being aware of that. And then what do we do, But I guess we wanted to talk about this today because there's a Christian element to all this.
Yeah.
Well, not just element, like for both you and I, it's it's not just where Jesus fits in, it's how Jesus informs our whole understanding of all of it.
Yeah. So unfortunately, last year, my friend Dwight was leading our adult ed forum on liberation theologies. And of course, the pandemic sort of disrupted that, but they got a few sessions in and, I was able to sit in on those. And the thing that has always been challenging to me about liberation theologies and liberation theology is that like, well, then what am I to God? Just like dirt,
Right.
If God privileges like these kinds of people. Yep. And I think the meaningful thing to me about liberation theology is that it liberates all of us, and to look like it's not just liberating, Black people or people that have been oppressed like over generations from poverty and from systems of oppression, but it also ultimately liberates me from white supremacy and liberates me from the kind of just those constructs of whiteness that are so intrinsic to who we are and what we do and kind of how we behave and the way that our families and societies and stuff are structured. But kind of back to the like your kind of beloved community piece. I think there are really good examples in the world right now of groups that are doing something like that very well. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's very rarely the church.
Yeah.
I know here in Nashville, we've got several kind of mutual aid societies that are working in neighborhoods, particularly historic neighborhoods of color.
Yeah.
I would say 12-step groups.
Yeah. Best. One of the greatest spiritual movements of the 20th century by far.
Really, really. I mean, I went to an AA meeting to support a parishioner who was giving his story. Yeah. And like, I looked around and I was like, I am uncomfortable here, like in a good way. Like there were some kind of rough looking characters, some yeah, just kind of some rough looking characters.
Yep.
And I was kind of like, ugh, I don't like, and I kept thinking, like, what would I do if these people showed up to church? They probably wouldn't be that comfortable either.
Right. That's
And
right.
yet we were there together sharing this time and this moment and eventually praying together,
Yep.
um
Oh, AA is killer. You show up, you pray. There's a reading from a sacred text. There's a testimony, and then if it's somebody's birthday, everybody shares a meal. It's Eucharist. I mean, it's except in AA, unlike in church, people actually stand up and talk about how their lives have been saved. When was the last time you went to church and someone stood up and said, "This church saved my life"? To go to AA, it's every day.
Yeah.
And they mean it. They're not just saying it. So we got a lot of work to do in that sense. Sometimes when Kira and I talk like this, guys, we love the church. Like, just for the record, it's not like we hate the church. We love the church. It's
we love it so much that we want it to be better. We do.
like
and that's where it comes from for me.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and we're all in. I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is my work. I will work within the church because for God's kingdom, when we say God's kingdom come, God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we don't just sit and wait for God to do it. We roll up our sleeves and we jump in and we work with God in the seeing of that happening. And these places where our church falls short should not be places of everlasting discouragement or disillusionment, but hopefully places where hope is born and where we can start to really together dig in and do and transform.
Yeah.
The church.
They also didn't start with you or me or anybody kind of watching this. Yeah. This is like deeply ingrained historical stuff. Yeah. And one of the things that our like middle school Christian formation class is doing is like they want to formulate an anti-racist statement for our church. And in doing so, they're kind of going back through the history and trying to figure out, like, how did our community benefit from maybe slavery at some point, but definitely racism.
Yep.
And what does sort of what does reparations look like? What does justice look like?
Yep.
Because we can't just, I'm really done with like reading books about stuff and then just, okay, now we know that sort of intellectually.
Right. Oh, I read that book.
Yeah.
Hey, did you change your life? No. Then I don't really care. Don't really care. Right. Oh, the Bible. Yeah, I read that. Change anything about yourself? No. Don't really. Then don't ever read the Bible again, actually. Like, I mean, I don't mean that. Everybody read your Bible all the time. But like, yeah, totally. All right. Hey, music. What have you been listening to?
Yeah. So Julian Baker came out with a new album.
Julian or Jillian?
Julian.
Julian Baker. Don't know them.
Julian Baker. So she is she's of this like group of, sad lady singers.
Good.
That I love. She is, so you name dropped a little bit and I'm gonna name drop a little bit now. Please. Too. She I think goes between Nashville and Memphis, but is in Nashville a lot, and she has attended my church before.
Love it. Love it.
And has been very open in interviews about her struggles with addiction, with being an LGBTQ Christian, and ways, honestly, and going back to kind of what we were talking about, ways in which the Episcopal Church sort of saved her life, and how sobriety saved her life, and how Jesus saved her life.
Yeah.
That doesn't always necessarily come through in her music, but like, if you know that it's there, you see it.
When you see it, you see it. So she has a new album out.
Yeah. So that's what I've been listening to.
Okay. I'm going to check it out.
It's definitely like
little oblivion.
Like get a cup of tea and a blanket, or like listen like in the tub or something.
Can I listen at night after the kids are in bed and I'm working on my bread?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I don't do bathtubs.
No.
I don't do it. Sitting in my own filth, not gonna happen. But I'm in.
Tea.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm in.
So what have you been listening to?
I've been on a Curtis Mayfield kick the last couple of days. Curtis Mayfield's one of my favorites, and so I've been doing a lot of Curtis Mayfield. I like to scan through my stuff. I was trying to get someone. I was trying to get a friend into the Velvet Underground recently.
Oh,
I really like the Velvet Underground. I love Lou Reed and Neil Young. I'm always popping Neil Young on, and then Iron and Wine's first album, or it might be second album, Creek Drank the Cradle. I think it's his first album. Anyways, but that's the main thing. But Curtis Mayfield, like when you're driving, you feel invincible when you're listening to Curtis Mayfield. What can't I do?
right.
So I recommend that wholeheartedly. I always recommend Curtis. And I've been listening to a podcast. I don't listen to podcasts.
Yeah, you're not a podcast person.
That is true. But I have a friend of mine who was like, look, it's only 5 episodes and it's something you're dealing with directly. And it's about the public school system and white people. And it's called Nice White Parents.
Yes.
Yep.
I have listened to this.
It is literally describing the school my child attends and the things that are going on in my school, in our school right now.
I think there is also a very interesting corollary in that podcast to the church in terms of like who has power, and just the kind of things that people kind of want from the church.
Yep.
At times. Can
I plug one last thing and then I'll stop?
Yes.
So throughout Lent, one of my coworkers and I, Annie Stevens Gleason, she has a podcast that not just in Lent, throughout the year called Interrupting Grace. It's just a cool title. And she's wonderful. It sounds like an NPR show. It's so well produced. But she and I throughout Lent are discussing, there's this way of love sort of curriculum for Lent. And we're like doing it as a podcast, the two of us talking.
Oh, cool.
And the conversations that we've had have just been like, we had a conversation the other day that was like the most, like, I'm like re-examining all the things I believe about life as a Christian because of this conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. It's like literally like I'm sitting there. So I just want to I want everyone to listen to the podcast Interrupting Grace. It's a little bit of a self plug, but then they'll get it on their thing. And then when I'm off, they'll still get to listen to Annie be brilliant. And it's really awesome. But so that's cool. But I'm going to listen to Julian Baker.
Yeah.
You're going to listen to some Curtis Mayfield.
Absolutely.
And then hey everybody. We didn't ask you a lot of questions this weekend. We're sorry. We were kind of having our conversation, but we are so glad that you're with us. Thank you for joining us today.
And please submit your questions.
Yep.
There is a form on the website.
There is.
And you can drop them in the comments. You can message Phil. You can message me.
Yep.
With your questions, comments, ideas for what you want to hear us rant and or
rave about.
Yeah, so we love to hear from you all. Yep. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays.
All right. Be well, everyone.